next show we're going to be talking about is Interviews with Monster Girls.
Ah, the one that I watched.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, this was the one that I had watched. That he had watched Gabriel Dropout, and I had missed out on that one. And I watched Interviews with Monster Girls, and he missed out on that one. And I will say, 100% for sure, yes, you definitely missed out on not getting this one. This one is a solid, absolutely solid anime. Where you were saying that Gabriel Dropout was missing the jokes and the humor, this one picked up on it.
Hey.
So it was, and it surprised me because, like, okay, beginning of it, did you watch the first episode for this one? I forget.
Yes.
Okay. So you mean, the beginning of it, you kind of get barely introduced to all the characters, more or less. You get like little snippets of everything, so you're kind of like in limbo, but you kind of more or less kind of know where things are at, more or less. But that's just like the tip of the iceberg. And I really like the only thing I have to compare this to in terms of it is what was the other one with Monster Girls? You know what I'm talking about? It happened a couple of seasons ago. It was very perverted.
Okay, yeah.
Do you remember the one I'm talking about, right?
Monster Musume.
Monster Musume, that's what it was. Okay.
Yeah.
And honestly, the only way this compares to that is that it has monsters. Other than that, this one does a phenomenal job of really drawing you in, because it even if you know nothing about the monsters that they're talking about, so you know nothing about vampires, succubus, Doulahans, and ice women, even if you know absolutely nothing about them, it's kind of like you're being walked through it, and it's not bad. Like there are some shows and some even other forms of media where you're looking at it going, oh God, they're explaining these things in so minute detail. But you get intrigued at the way that they present themselves. And some of the things that they talk about and some of the things that they do, you don't really think about until they presented them to you. I'll give you an example. The vampire girl came up to him wondering why her eyes glowed in a picture and yet her sister didn't. And he ends up explaining the fact that basically it's because her eyes are more animalistic than actually human. And animal eyes have like a little mirror in the back because they're able to pick up so much light, and it's how she can actually see better at night than she does during the day. Whether than normal humans. So like and then he showed her pictures of like other animals, and you see in the flash of the picture, all the animals have like their eyes are glowing because of it, because the light that gets picked up for it. But she can see that, and because she can see at night, and so and then he's trying to tell her, hey, make sure you're wearing sunglasses, and then of course she's like, Sensei, how long do you think I've been a vampire? Of course I know this. She's like, she pulls out a pair of sunglasses and everything. I got them, So the characters themselves are very charming and endearing. I thought it was going to be a little bad with a succubus, and I was like, oh, how are they gonna play this? How is this gonna go? But it actually turns out really well, and I think they knew that character was going to be a hard character. Because like the other characters, they kind of like do a little bit of story with, but the succubus, the teacher, they actually devoted an entire episode to her, and you get to see her life and what she does, and it's interesting and cool to see the fact that these are monsters living in our world. Literally, it is our world, straight up. But they're living and they're accepted. See, that was the other thing I didn't quite like with Monster Musume. There was not an acceptance. You kind of seemed like they were barred from everything. They couldn't go outside without their chaperone. They couldn't, move into the real world without some sort of host.
Yeah.
All these limitations that they had on them. But here, it's accepted. Now, you end up finding out there is kind of like a police force that kind of monitors and makes sure nothing bad happens. And like you get the idea that before this, that there was a lot more issues and problems, but you're at the point in the story now where things are kind of mellowed out. So you just have the fact that these monsters exist in this world, and you're just learning about them because you're taking the story of the teacher and he just wants to know more about them. And then the more he knows about them, the more he wants to help them, the more he wants to be able to get them to be more accepted, because even though they are accepted in society, in the class, there's a little bit of stigma between them. You know, they're almost looked at as like special needs. And he's like, I don't want that. I want them to be accepted for who they are and just to be able to live a normal life. That's what they want. So in a lot of ways, you know, again, he's just trying to help them through that and help them to understand. He helps them to understand themselves. He helps them to understand their abilities because, like the Ice Woman, she had some issues dealing with that. And he helped her along with that. And then he just helps them to be able to live normal lives. So, which, I mean, can be quite interesting. You know, like they did have a pool episode. And that was interesting with the Doulahan, considering you're like, yeah. So, and then they kind of discussed about the mythos about how Doulahans can't cross running streams. And the Doulahan that she was talking to was like, well, I kind of get that. He's like, I understand where that comes from. He's like, why? He's like, well, think about it. If a Doulahan's crossing the stream and he accidentally drops his head, well, that could be a problem.
Wow.
So that's what I was like. We were like, okay, yeah, I get that. So it wasn't like they technically can't cross the stream. It's more like it probably shouldn't, just in case something were to happen. So, and then they were talking about how all Doulahans are considered like knights, and you know, in armor and riding horses. And like, well, what if like the most famous of Doulahan out there just happened to be a knight? And that's the reason why everyone remembers Doulahans for that particular reason. It's not the say that all Doulahans are knights or ride horses or whatever. It's just the fact that the most famous of them all might have been that way, you know? So it's interesting to see these things and think about it and go, okay, yeah, that could be interesting, you know. And then they even talked about how the fact that, you know, you look, the head's detached, but there actually is a neck. It's just that our perception of it, you don't see that. The only thing you see is the head detached and the flames coming out of the body. But in reality, there is actually a neck. Yeah. So it's like, all right, you know, it's this is why it was very intriguing. It was very intriguing. I'm curious. Like they could go more with this, and I kind of hope they do, because there's honestly like more, you know, as they get older. I'm curious, like a new school year. Okay, now something new happens with their body. Now they find something new out, you know, and you're like, okay, you know, now we have to cope with this and see how this works out, you know. So it was very much like a slice of life, but at the same time, it was very different because of the characters that were there, that were in it. So. Oh, and I know I kind of went off track with the succubus one. I was going to mention what that one though is because you actually see she tries really, really hard not to be a succubus as much as she can. That's why you see her dressed in like the gym clothes. Yeah. She tries to put all of her femininity away so that way she does not detract males in that sense.
Okay.
And because she wears that, because she can't touch anybody, because it's going to be an automatic thing with touch. Yeah. But because she wears that, even if she bumps into somebody and she tries to avoid that too, someone will look at her and it'll immediately go away instead of being continually attracted. And that's the reason why she does that. Because they showed that too, is that she bumped into one of the students and immediately he was like, oh, and he turned and looked at her and he was like, oh. And then he just continued on. You know, so I was like, okay, yeah. And, you know, and then she takes other precautions. Like she lives very far away from anybody. She lives out in the middle of nowhere simply because that way when she's asleep, she does not, if like she falls asleep and there are people around her, she gives them sexy dreams. Like at one point she was on the subway and there was like two other people there with her and she was so tired, she started to nod off. And the minute she did, the other guy all of a sudden perked up and was like, she immediately woke up and she's like, okay, no, can't do that. I gotta stay awake. You know? And then she always takes the very earliest train she possibly can. So she's always at school like before everyone else. And she'll do a whole bunch of cleaning because she's bored, basically. So, I mean, I kind of feel sorry for her in a lot of ways. And then she stays as late as possible and takes the very last train to get home. So she literally spends her entire day there at school. But simply because if she didn't, she'd run the risk of causing issues or problems.
Yeah. So
it's just a story like that. I'm like, it's super intriguing. And it's like, I want to see more. I want to know more. I root for, obviously, like, not with the young girls have feelings for him, but obviously the teacher, she's the succubus and the main teacher, they want to, well, she wants to have things with him, but they're leaving that kind of like, they do these little subtle things where like she'll try to do a little something, and he tries so hard to play it off like it was nothing and keep going. So she's under the impression that he has a sort of a barrier. He can stand some of her charm. So she tries to play that. And he just, every time she leaves, she's like, oh my God, that was so sexy. Oh my God. He's trying really hard to act the gentleman in this. And it just becomes so difficult. So again, see, this is what I'm saying. For me, where you were saying before that Gabriel Dropout kind of dropped the ball on like the jokes because they kept, really repeating the same ones, or they just, it became kind of flat, especially in the middle. To me, Interview with the Monster Girls, that just kept going exponentially up as it went. And became more interesting as I went. So
okay, so looks like I'm gonna have to get back to that one then.
Oh yeah.
So I guess one question that's not really story related, but because I kind of don't want to spoil it for myself since I plan on watching it. Did they explain that there's more than 4 different types?
I don't ever think they actually said specifically. They really kept saying about how the fact that there are the monsters being born is very rare on its own. Like I think at one point they actually said in this world there are only 3 Dulans in the entire world.
Okay.
So it's like everything is it's not to say that there's not a possibility. They could add more monsters into it, and it could actually make sense because you're like, okay, well, these probably exist too. Why not? But it's the fact that they're like, it's super rare.
Okay.
And that's kind of the reason why he wanted to know more, because it's not something that you see on a regular basis. And he's like, wow, this can actually happen. I want to know. What is it that's about these things, And that's the first, when he sat down, the vampire girl's first one he talked to, and he was going through all the tropes of vampires going, okay, does this affect you? Does this affect you? And he just, because he wanted to know for sure what was the things that happened. So, and again, another cool thing about it, he was talking about vampires, and they were talking about how vampires have that stigma about garlic and everything. Mm. That's an old vampire thing. Oh, garlic will get away. Well, he was saying because of her predator nature, where she has, better eyesight, all of her senses are enhanced. Yeah. Because it's all for predator thing. Well, think about it. Garlic is very strong smelling. Yeah. So it's not the fact that she can't have garlic. It's the fact that it's so strong smelling. It has an adverse effect in that regards. Yeah. So it's these little things, and I'm like, I would never have thought about that, but that's actually kind of cool. So yeah, I'm hoping that this continues and that we get more about this, and that I even hope they add more monsters into it, because it could even go further with that, and I would be perfectly fine with it if they continue along the same lines as they've done with the previous ones. Like if they add more in, you got to do it the same way you've done the previous ones, because otherwise it wouldn't feel the same. Okay. So, anyways, yep, highly recommend it. Awesome show.
Cool. I feel like in that show, I'll be watching it. I'll be like, oh. See? Okay.
I was doing that too. I'm like, I know monsters a lot, and yet I'm like, I never thought about that. That's interesting. So it was awesome.
Okay. All right. I will definitely check that one out.
It could have easily played out into like a two-part movie compilation, and it would have been just even better.
Yeah, I'm trying to think like what part could they have like stopped it
for the beginning, and they had the idea for the end, but they're like, I don't know what to do in the middle. I'm like, oh, just throw something in there. It's all good.
Yeah, like, oh, let's go get that anime checkbook. Like, okay, whatever, beach episode, New Year's episode.